everyone, and welcome back to American Musical Theater. From Oklahoma to Guys and Dolls, from Carousel to My Fair Lady, it's all on Broadway. Now, I've auditioned for many Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein musicals, and I'm always in awe of their work because, beginning with Oklahoma in the middle of the Second World War, they had pioneered a kind of show in which the story was more important than anything else. We have finally hit the golden age of the book musical. That is going to be from 1940s through the 1950s and on to now today. Dramatic stories were transformed into a wealth of Broadway classics, including The Lerner and Loewe, My Fair Lady. Oh, how lovely it was.
All I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air, with one enormous chair. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Lots of chocolate for me to eat, lots of cow making lots of meat, warm place, warm hands, warm feet. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Oh, so lovely, sit at the blue still. I would never budge till spring crept over the windowsill. Someone's head resting on my knee, warm and tender as he can be. Who takes good care of me? Oh, wouldn't it be lovely?
One of everyone's favorite musicals, My Fair Lady. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Throughout World War II, with the threat of enemy aircraft a constant fear, the lights of New York City were frequently turned off Broadway. So we have turned off the lights before, and the lights have always come back on, and soon they will again. Broadway at that time was target number one for pleasure seekers of the world. So you can douse its glimmer for an hour, you can pull some switches and make a darkness pitch, but lights are always there waiting, and they'll come on again even in our generation. Because as sure as shooting, this is Broadway and this is America. As wartime enveloped New York, the 47-year-old writer and lyricist Oscar Hammerstein II retreated to his farm in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. There, in the spring of 1942, he was struggling to adapt to Georges Bizet's opera. He had decided that he was basically retired, and he took Bizet's opera Carmen, and he was trying to make it into a musical. In fact, it became a great musical, Carmen Jones, with an all-black cast. It took some time to develop and to write, so that it could keep the storyline and still have its own modern flavor. As Oscar Hammerstein III is quoted as saying, "My grandfather was at a low point in his career. He was concerned and he was considered something of a has-been at that time, a relic of an earlier time. His greatest hits were a good 11 or 12 years behind him. He was no longer working with anyone, and he was trying to refocus his craft. His grandson got to know him in the country, not in the city. He was sort of a surrogate father to him from the age of 11 to 15. Oscar saw in his grandson someone he could pass his knowledge on to, somebody who was interested in writing songs. The image I have of the two of them is borrowed from a photo of them sitting on a front porch and sitting there looking at the sunset over the fields and the cows in the distance, and this kind of open-hearted view of the world. In April of 1942, Oscar received a phone call from composer Richard Rodgers, who wanted to adapt a play about cowboys and ranchers. It's a new musical, and Rodgers' partner, Larry Hart, was in ill health. He was depressed and he was unfit to work. But Hammerstein was intrigued by the homespun drama and teamed up with Rodgers. The resulting show ushered in a new era in musical theater.
Gonna give you barley, carrots, and potatoes, pasture for the cattle, spinach and tomatoes.
Flowers on the prairie where the June bugs zoom. Plenty of air and plenty of room.
Plenty of room to swing a rope.
Plenty of heart and plenty of hope.
Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain, and the waving wheat can sure smell sweet when the wind comes right behind the rain. Oklahoma, every night my honey lamb and I sit alone and talk and watch a hawk making lazy circles in the sky. We know we belong to the land, and the land we belong to is grand. And when we say, aye-yi-fi-oh-yay, we're only saying you're doing fine, Oklahoma, Oklahoma, okay.
Oklahoma is a very simple story, but it is a story, and it is about character and relationships. On a very naive level, it attempts to explore relationships the way a play does, and that had not been done in commercial musical theater. Musical comedy, actually, is what it was originally called. That had stopped really with the Rodgers and Hammerstein shows. The word comedy got in there. But then after this musical, that word got dropped. They had stopped really with the Rodgers and Hammerstein shows, and now it has become an accepted theatrical genre. It was now known as the musical, not musical comedy, just the musical. And from that point on, the creative drive of the shows was from the writers of the shows, not the stars, not specialty numbers, not variety acts. Oklahoma signaled the beginning of a time when a well-crafted story, poignant, funny, or dramatic, became the essential element of the Broadway musical. When Richard Rodgers left Larry Hart to work with Roger Hammerstein, he gained a partner who favored sincerity over cynicism and who wrote the dialogue as well as the song lyrics, intricately bound into the story. Oscar invented the musical book. As you'll recall, it started to take form in Showboat, and then he got finally to Oklahoma. All that time, he was dealing with a book that was quite difficult. He made the score follow the book instead of how it had been, which was always the other way around. The book had been following the score around somewhat like an elephant keeper and kind of cleaning up after the score to make it into a show. Suddenly along came Oscar, and the story was the lead. By the time they worked together, Rodgers had already scored 30 musicals, while Hammerstein had written 27. So they were pretty experienced at this point. They drew upon this vast experience in reimagining the musical form, and no musical numbers that would showcase a star, no songs written just to become popular hits. Even the show's opening number went against the grain of expectations. The curtain went up, and instead of a big opening number, there was just an old lady sitting there, churning butter.
Out of your dreams and into his arms you are.
I'll get to that in a minute. Got the wrong one here. So you have an old woman churning butter on stage, right?
What a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. Oh, the sounds of the earth are like music. Oh, the sounds of the earth are like music. The breeze is so busy, don't miss a tree. And old Weeping Willow is laughing at me. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. Oh, what a beautiful day.
Strange way to begin a musical. At that point, they were ready for dancing feet and big people churning butter. That was the opening of a musical. And everybody's saying, what kind of show is this? Oh, what a beautiful morning. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. It lifts you up. It puts you into that atmosphere, into the environment. There was a famous revival of Oklahoma recently in which the gender roles were changed and the leading romantic characters were women. This worked perfectly well. These characters and the situations they were placed in are built so strong and so well that this musical can be altered to suit modern tastes without needing to alter the actual writing and foundation of the show. Oklahoma also changed the role. I was going to give you another piece of Oklahoma. Let me see. That's all right. I'll keep going. Oklahoma also changed the role the dance played in a musical. Choreographer Agnes DeMille was the niece of the epic filmmaker Cecil B. DeMille. I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. Same one. That was her uncle. And she had strong ideas of how dance could do more than simply entertain. I think one of the landmark innovations in the American musical theater was made by Agnes DeMille. The Dream Ballet. Laurie's dream had never been seen on a Broadway stage because the dancing had really become storytelling. Here's some of the Dream Ballet music. Choreography explored Oklahoma's love triangle. Laurie, a flirtatious young girl, Curly, a love-struck cowboy, and Judd, a brooding hired hand. Oscar originally outlined the Dream Ballet as set in a circus, and Agnes DeMille said to Oscar, Mr. Hammerstein, what has this ballet have to do with the hunt and the predatory nature of such a relationship dynamic, a triangle like that? This is not the lovely romantic kind of dream that young girls actually has. This needs to be a dream full of worry. It would have to be a dream that also has romance, terror, more like a haunted dream. She also pointed out that there hadn't been any sex in Act 1, and he hadn't realized that at all. When Oklahoma opened at the St. James Theater, the United States had been at war for 16 months. With empty seats to fill, the cast offered free tickets to coax U.S. servicemen into the theater. The GI's emotional response to the show hinted at the enormous success that was to come for everybody who came to see that show. All the soldiers went overseas for the duration. The actors told story of remembering that rippling roll of uniforms out at the back of the house, in the back of the audience, as they performed. They could see them. And there wasn't an empty seat in the house. All those soldiers in the back of the theater were watching this kind of folksy show, sort of happy, but tears were streaming down their faces because this musical symbolized home to them and what they were going to have to be ready to die for. There wasn't another empty seat for years after that. Not only was Oklahoma the hottest ticket on Broadway, but it led to a best-selling cast album that brought the original performances into living rooms across the nation, a little like having Hamilton on Disney Channel Plus, being in your living room. Oklahoma played for 5 solid years, breaking the record for the longest running musical by over 800 performances. There are right now, over 600 productions, amateur and professional, in the United States each year. On any given day, 2 separate performances of Oklahoma are likely to be playing somewhere in America. Now I'm going to move us out of the prairie and into...
The wonderful town, the Bronx is up and the battery's down. The people ride in a hole in the ground. New York, New York, it's a wonderful town.
Moving into New York, New York. This is a musical called On the Town. It was the next popular musical of the time. We see the famous sights, we'll find the romance, the danger waiting in it. So what we like best of the nights in New York are shown in this musical.
So the guidebook say, I told my grandpa I wouldn't miss on any. We got just one day, gotta see the whole town right from Yonkers on down to the Bay. In just one day, New York, New York, the wonderful town. The Bronx is up and the battery's down. The people riding all around. New York, New York, it's a wonderful town.
Now the interesting thing about that is the immediacy that's also talked about in the show. They only have one day to see everything. Inspired by the success of Oklahoma, a group of young artists got together in 1944 to create a new musical. This is at Elk Green. Betty Comden, first woman writer, Leonard Bernstein, and Jerome Robbins, all were in their 20s. Following the lead of Oscar Hammerstein, they set out to write what was then being called an integrated musical, meaning all of the disciplines were all in the show: singing, dancing, acting. They were all novices. They really, really were. They didn't know a thing about doing a show. They just decided to write down, what they wanted to do or not do. They decided that the show would be integrated, that they wanted everything in it to serve the show. They wanted things to be direct, simple, honest, not fancy, not phony, no more Winchell slang, no more Big Apple. They wrote all of these ideas down on a piece of paper. And the musical, entitled On the Town, was the story of 3 sailors on a 24-hour shore leave searching for fun and romance in New York City. One unusual thing about On the Town, which makes it unique, I think even today, is Leonard Bernstein's score. It's really a symphonic score, and the reason it doesn't happen often is it's very hard to do. Leonard Bernstein was able to capture kind of a hyper-energized throb of the city, and he saw that the orchestra itself could be a major protagonist in the musical. And the dance sequences could have a kind of a drive, a kind of danger that was very powerful. Jerome Robbins first collaborated with Bernstein on the ballet Fancy Free. Choreographing a musical gave him the chance to mix ideas from his classical dance background with whimsical stories and comic situations. It was all very contemporary. The war was still on, sailors were around, life was right there on the streets for us to see. Jerome Robbins he's very funny as a choreographer. Robbins is one of the few choreographers who really had humor and the vitality of New York and ordinary people, like subway riders and sailors, and not magic swans or enchanted princes, but, real people. On the Town opened at the Adelphi Theater on December 28, 1944, and playfully captured the frantic search for love during wartime. Imagine a musical today that could capture the humor and the ridiculousness of trying to find romance during quarantine. Is there humor. I think there are a lot of good stories about finding romance in quarantine, for sure. What's really fascinating is the sense of power and control the women had in On the Town. The female characters admit to having sexual drives. Oh my goodness. They're assertive. They're in command. In comparison, Laurie from Oklahoma was kind of an invented character. Very sweet, very flat, two-dimensional. When you're later on in this musical and On the Town, you have Hildy and Claire who are like, come here, I need a man. Let's hear some of that. Mind you, this was the first time that we were seeing a woman writer in the mix. No doubt that had an effect as well.
No. Let's go to Chambers Street. They told me I could see New York in all its growing strength and power from atop its highest peak, atop the famous Woolworth Tower. The Woolworth Tower. I won't in, but I said the wool out. Did you stop for hey what?
That ain't the highest spot. You're just a little late. We've got the Empire State. Let's go to my place.
Let's go to Cleopatra's Needle.
Go to my place.
Let's go to Wanamaker's store.
Let's go to my place.
Let's go to Lindy's, go to Lou
Go
Chow's.
to my place.
Let's go to Radio City and Herald Square.
Go to my
Go to
place.
Rubens.
My
Go to
place.
Macy's.
Go to my
Go to
place.
Roxy.
Go to my
Of course,
place.
there's
My place.
Gibbons,
My place.
Flatiron, Building, Hippodrome.
My place.
Probably having a woman writer had a bit of an effect on the female characters in this particular musical. Along with the humorous escapades of its young lovers, On the Town vividly captured the spirit of a country at war with an uncertain future for the women at home and the men coming back on leave. Well, it felt like the audience was seeing themselves as something different from the gloomy newspaper and war correspondence images. There was a war, but they were still young, and joy could still be found even then. It just covered all of their lives tremendously. The pain of being separated was very tangible. Where has the time all gone to? They had to feel like we do. We haven't done half the things we wanted to, and this musical helped them feel like they could buy time. It's like, oh well, I guess we'll catch up some other time.
24 hours can go so fast. You look around, the day has passed. When you're in love, time is precious stuff. Even a lifetime isn't enough. Where has the time all gone to? Haven't done half the things we want to. Oh well, we'll catch up some other time. This day was just a token. Too many words
We'll catch up
are
some other time.
spoken.
That did have the feeling about a life being short and that we all just have this brief moment in life, and joy can be the feeling of poignancy. Let's see if we can cram as much as we can into the few hours you've got, because you don't really know if you'll have any more. That feeling hangs over the whole show.
But let's be glad for what we've had and what's to come. There's so much more embracing still to be done, but time is racing.
After the success of Oklahoma, Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein made a daring choice. They decided to adapt a German show called Lilium. It was a bleak Hungarian drama in a musical set in 19th century New England. And Lilium became what we know as Carousel. At the heart of the play was an intense but doomed love affair, not the kind of romance that typify musicals at all.
You're a queer one, Julie Jordan. You were quieter and deeper than a well. And you never tell me nothing. There's nothing that I care to choose to tell. You've been acting most peculiar. Every morning you're awake ahead of me. Always sitting by the window. I like to watch the river meet the sea. When we work in the mill, weaving at the loom, you gaze absent-minded at the roof. And half the time your shuttle gets twisted in the threads till you can't tell the warp from the woof. Tain't so, you're a queer one, Julie Jordan. You won't ever tell a body what you think.
Something I don't think that they questioned at all at the time was the advisability of doing a show with a lead, a romantic lead about a guy who was a domestic abuser. And at the very end of the show, he commits suicide. Oklahoma had given these writers the confidence to say, well, yeah, but this is a great story. People don't usually do stories like this in musical theater. So let's do this one.
If I loved you, time and again I would try to say all I'd want you to know. If I loved you, words wouldn't come in an easy way. Round in circles I'd go, longing to tell you, but afraid and shy. I'd let my golden chances pass me by. Soon you'd leave me, off you would go in the mist of day. Never, never to
This is a very difficult musical, and it isn't produced often anymore because of the domestic violence. The ballad, though, was one of the great centers of a musical. But the fact is that ballad can't be sung until the characters know each other. You can't sing about your undying love to somebody you just met. So Oscar had to invent the conditional ballad. The first one I know about is in Showboat. They go, only make believe you love me. They don't know each other well enough, so they have to make believe that they're in love. And then Carousel comes along and she says, if I loved you. It's all in the future. It's all in conditional phrasing, so you could have a wonderful ballad in the first act. That was Oscar Hammerstein's convention. He created it, and it was brilliant for the exposition, for knowing the characters, and for being able to predict where they may go. Rodgers and Hammerstein were not timid about changing their source material. While the play Lilium was bitter and pessimistic, Oscar depicted a world where even the most troubled man could dream of his family's future with hope and optimism. This is when he finds out he's going to have a child.
My boy Bill, I will see that he's named after me. I will. My boy Bill, he'll be tall and as tough as a tree. Will Bill, like a tree he'll grow with his head held high and his feet planted firm on the ground. And you won't see nobody dare to try to boss him or toss him around. No pot-bellied, baggy-eyed bully will boss him around. I don't give a damn what he does, as long as he does what he likes. He can sit on his tail or work on a
This
wheel.
is not a likable character. This soliloquy from Carousel was a change for Billy Bigelow, and you're not sure you like the guy when he goes around slapping Julie Jordan and being rough with her. And then he gets to the saloon when she's just told him that he's going to be a father, and this brings out a whole other quality. The scenes of domestic violence in this day and age really make it so the show cannot be easily produced anymore. Audiences really can't accept those scenes quietly. It's too bothering. But what an audience does respond to is what's going on underneath these characters, and it's very hard to listen to Carousel without being emotionally moved. It isn't just that it's basically a story that the audience wants to hear, love conquers death and so on. Whether you believe that the happy endings are true or not, their characters and the stories that concern them is because of the way Oscar told those stories.
See nobody dare to try to boss him or toss him around. No back-bottom, flabby-faced, pot-bellied, baggy-eyed bastard will boss him around. And I'm damned if he'll marry his boss's daughter. A skinny-lipped virgin with blood like water will give him a peck and call it a kiss and look in his eyes through a lorgnette. Say, why am I carrying on like this? My kid ain't even been born yet. I can see him when he's 17 or so.
Within 3 weeks of the opening of Carousel, the war in Europe was over for a brief time. In the 1940s, the picture of a more inclusive America was reflected on the Broadway stage in shows like Call Me Mister, St. Louis Woman, and Finian's Rainbow, which satirized race relations in the Deep South. These ambitious shows leaned into the blossoming of the American musical as we know it, with a full story, challenging dancing, fully created music, the need for actors who are proper triple threats to be able to sing, dance, and act at the top of your skills 8 times a week, 300